Mazda now makes a rear drive based, turbocharged inline-six premium crossover, and it's priced in the ballpark of its more mainstream rivals. That sounds like good news to me, but I think Mazda needs to work on listening. If you enjoy fun, detailed car reviews without fluff, subscribe and hit the bell for notifications. It may seem small, but it helps the channel get more cars to review. Thank you. Starting at $41,000, I wouldn't consider it the bargain of the segment. You can also make that price fly high enough to catch the attention of the FAA. We're talking 60 grand, but unlike suspicious drones, this does not deserve to be shot down as it's equipped very well, even at the base trim. At the entry point, you're going to have LED headlights and taillights, rain-sensing windshield wipers, proximity unlock and lock, and a power rear tailgate. Step up to the premium like what's next to me and that will become hands-free. My spec here also gets 21-inch wheels. Everything below this gets 19s, but I think all of them still have enough sidewall. I'm also glad that Mazda has an appropriate amount of body cladding here, enough to make you feel protected, but not enough to make it look like an RC car. Now, style is all up to personal preference, so let me know your thoughts. I think that the CX-90 looks expensive, but I'm also very glad that it comes with as many amenities as it does, because it also looks like a CX-5 that's having an allergic reaction. And then around back, it has that sort of beluga forehead going on. Of course, I'm not the prime demographic for a vehicle like this, so let me know your thoughts. When it comes to size, it's a hair longer than the old CX-9, but it's not any wider or taller really. However, it comes with a wheelbase that is 7.5 inches longer. There's a short overhang up front. It also has 8 inches of ground clearance, making this acceptable in some off-road-ish scenarios. That may also help alleviate some curb concerns, but I am disappointed that you have to spend at least $54,000 in order to get a 360 view camera on the CX-90. Here at the premium level, you will have parking sensors. Now, if you do want the fanciest CX-90, you will have to spec one of the Turbo S models, which will give you a nice boost in power, but you're going to pay for it. There's also a naturally aspirated 2.5-liter plug-in hybrid model that will be available soon. Briefly, I'd like to thank Royal South Mazda for letting me test drive a CX-90 to make this video possible. Royal South is a friendly, transparent, small dealer with a good inventory. If you're in the market, check them out and tell them thanks for me. Thankfully, my tester at $50,000 is more than competitive on the inside. To say this is Mazda's best work yet almost may be an understatement, but as a family vehicle, I still think it drops the ball. Mazda has done a remarkable job when it comes to design, materials, build quality, and just the overall ambiance. So to start things off, this has more of an open and airy vibe than I'm used to for a Mazda product. Part of that is due to these kind of large windows and maybe the width here too. Build quality in this class at this price is great. The materials, I mean, it's kind of hard to tell what's fake and what's real. Being a Mazda, you have soft touch all over the dashboard, and continuing over on your armrests, they're very plush. I have soft touch materials here where my knees rest. But I do want to note this console is pretty wide. I haven't found it to be a problem, but if you have a more stocky frame than myself, then that could be different. You also have physical HVAC controls that have a nice little click to them. I may prefer rotary dials, but these are nice too, and they're matte finished. In fact, there's hardly any glossy black plastic. This looks as good in person as it does on camera. And we also have comfortable seats. I've been upset with Mazda because they haven't been able to get their seats completely right in a while. Sometimes they pinch your shoulders a little bit. Other times there's a weird center seam that kind of prods at your stuff. But here we have standard lumbar adjustment, reasonably soft cushioning, good support all around, pretty mild bolstering. It could use, an extendable thigh support. I really like those for taller drivers. But even here at 6'3", I think I would be more than fine on a long journey in the CX-90. And it's ergonomically correct too. My elbows kind of rest at the same level. And I also have the infotainment system right here, so I don't need to lift a finger. It does have on the preferred trim wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. The user interface is basically the same with a slight font change, which, come on guys,
It's still, you know, kind of convoluted to change the radio station, but overall, if you can get used to its oversimplified nature, while you're driving, it's very easy to use and nowhere near as distracting as most setups now. You're going to have a standard driving display. It's kind of small, does very basic stuff as well.
For more functionality and wow factor, Premium Plus and above get a fully digital gauge cluster.
Material-wise, you're going to have leatherette seats, a leather steering wheel as standard. Step up to the next trim, you'll get leather, and a softer Napa leather will come on the Premium Plus trim. Now, if you want heated seats, go to the preferred trim. You can get ventilated seats up front. You can actually get ventilated seats around back.
But here in my premium trim, I have neither.
At least the premium trim buyers will get a Bose sound system. It's got 12 speakers, has plenty of punch, and good clarity at higher volumes.
Lower trims will suffice with an 8-speaker unit.
Something that was introduced for the CX-90 was a panoramic sunroof. And that helps, again, with that open vibe, but that doesn't help this become a better family hauler. In fact, this makes very few advancements in that field. There's not even like the dad mirror that's in a bunch of 3-row SUVs. A lot of these SUVs now will even offer things like a 3rd-row communication system. And there's other weird choices, like the storage in here. It's not really that impressive. You have a very shallow center console. The cup holders are tiny. You know, you got little door pockets that maybe are acceptable in a smaller SUV, but here it's just kind of disappointing. There's a wireless charger that'll come on a lot of them, but it doesn't work if you have a newer iPhone
or any phone with a big camera bump.
And then there's also a trim piece here that's like its purpose was to immobilize tall people. It juts out like a dagger. I almost dismantled my patella the first time I got into it. Thankfully, my knees receive 0 punishment in the rear seat. And I also have good headroom. The thigh support is impressive too. The seats feel pretty high off the ground. And you can get an 8-passenger version of this, which comes standard in the lower trims. I have a nice collapsible cup holder tray. Tri-zone automatic climate control is standard across the board, as is rear console vents, big storage here in the door pockets. You also have nice sunshades available. The materials too are still nice. We have good stitching, the same wood and metallic looking accents, and some soft elbow rests. This would make for a great road trip vehicle, but only if you have 4 people. You have extremely wide opening rear doors, and since the door itself is pretty big, you have a good access point. Once you step in here, my knees are driving into the seat back. But just like with most other crossovers, there's enough space that I can push the second row forward, and I'd still have enough space for someone my size in each row. And whenever you consider that, this becomes much more attractive because I have enough headroom. The seats back here are also plush, so adults can actually use these seats, and I think children would be comfortable. This feels, you know, a little bit bigger than the CX-9, but it's still gonna trail vehicles like the Honda Pilot, like the VW Atlas, the new Toyota Grand Highlander. You have vents back here, which are actually placed right on your thighs, which should be a nice deterrent for swamp ass. And if you have charging needs, you do have a port on either side, along with 4 cup holders. Personally, I think it is very generous to call this a 3-wide bench. On some of the Turbo S models, it would actually just be a 6-seater, and that's how I would use this anyway. Ooh. Behind the 3rd row of the CX-90, there is not very much space. I mean, it's not like 3-row crossovers typically excel in this area, but it is still small for the segment. Now, you can, of course, fold down your 2nd row seats, and it's usable. It's fairly flat. It does get long, but by the cargo numbers, it lags behind most of the segment. But coming up a little short on practicality is the Mazda way. They tend to make up for this on the road. The CX-90 takes Mazda to premium places that it has never been, with a few caveats. When it comes to the powertrain, just about everything is new with the CX-90. We're going to have a 3.3 liter turbocharged inline 6. This is going to also have a 48-volt mild hybrid system hooked up to it, which is supposed to help with auto stop start, and it runs the accessories. This does have a completely different type of transmission than what Mazda's used to. It actually is a wet clutch automatic, not a dual clutch, just singular wet clutch, no torque converter. Honestly, they've done a pretty good job, but it still does show some of that jerkiness there at low speeds. On occasion, you can get it to roll back a little bit in the right situation. Overall, still pretty smooth at low speed.
Regular shifting is consistently refined, but sometimes you will notice a subtle hesitancy or jolt during takeoff. Thankfully, the silky torque helps save the luxury appeal.
We're talking 332 pound-feet. It doesn't make this big SUV fast, really in the slightest, but it does make passing pretty easy, just like the old 2.5 liter turbo did for the lighter CX-9. This also does have much more horsepower at 280, but you can also get that Turbo S model, which bumps things up to 340 horsepower on premium fuel, but you'll get 369 pound-feet of torque either way. I think that powertrain may be worth it if you're already spending the premium plus money, but I have no qualms with this setup. And you do get a hint of classic inline six noise as you get it up to higher RPMs, giving it more character than most engines in this class. Just don't expect it to be a juggernaut. Now let's try a quick acceleration test. 0 to 60 there came up in 6.9 seconds. I'm sure you could build boost at the launch to avoid that turbo lag, but that's not really the point of this car. This feels on par, maybe a little bit quicker than its competition. The transmission also does a good job at responding in an appropriate amount of time. It doesn't feel like it's really ever lugging the engine, and the low end torque also means it doesn't need to downshift as often as its naturally aspirated V6 competition. Put it in sport mode and it'll hold on to gears and become even more eager. This also does have an off-road mode, and that's helpful when you have standard all-wheel drive. This is actually a rear-biased system, so I think it would be very capable off-road if it had more ground clearance, because looking at other Mazdas that have the off-road mode, which uses the brakes to shuffle power side to side, they seem pretty capable. For snow, this will be great. Though I do wish that they offered a proper torque vectoring diff on this kind of vehicle, something that most of the competition doesn't offer anyway. Now you can also get a plug-in hybrid version, and that is going to have an embarrassing 26 miles of range. It's going to use actually the naturally aspirated 2.5 liter engine, which I think is an interesting but dependable choice. Combined, it's going to make 323 ponies. I'm glad that Mazda's starting to dip their toes in plug-in hybrids. At 65 miles per hour, you're around 1700 RPM. While not like a full-blown luxury cruiser, I would call it quiet enough to compete in even the premium category. Mazda also wants to brag about the turning circle, which, to be honest, is actually pretty good.
The towing capacity is more average at 5,000 pounds for the preferred plus and up, 1,500 more than the lower specs due to an engine oil cooler. Gas mileage is good for the class, though the high output engine recommends you feed it premium, but that's not required.
Now when it comes to comfort, this doesn't ride like it's on a cloud. In fact, on the worst road that I have here, something like a Toyota Highlander is more forgiving, definitely. While I'm glad that over smaller imperfections, it feels smooth, get it over the big stuff and it will make its way into the cabin in kind of a less than ideal fashion. I think comparing to most other three-row SUVs in this class, this is not as plush. It seems more geared to sporty driving, and it does perform above par on that front. One of the first things that I noticed getting in this at parking lot speeds especially is how slow the steering is. But once you start getting this thing up to speed, it really begins to make sense. There is very little play on center. This does a great job at feeling tight. There's none of this vagueness that you get with a lot of SUVs of its size. And even just a little bit of that Mazda steering feel is pumped in. And as you bring it up to higher speeds, you really begin to appreciate more how direct the steering is and predictable. I don't feel like, I need to make a whole lot of corrections here. There's also kinematic posture control, which is from the Miata, and that breaks the inner wheel. I don't feel it a whole lot, just kind of driving it more regularly, but I am pleased with its back road performance. The brakes are a little sticky though. When it comes to body motion for a big three-row SUV, it feels under control. It's definitely present. It doesn't hide its weight. And even on roads that are less than ideal, this does have independent rear suspension, something that some other Mazda SUVs have been getting rid of lately. And I think that helps this feel pretty controlled. Not as taut though and poised as something like you will get with an Audi product.
But it will compare favorably to most of the mainstream competition. This deserves a hat tip. I may wish for a little more plushness, but it remains comfortable while also handling in a way that embarrasses most largish crossovers.
While on the exterior, the greenhouse may look a little funky from certain angles. The glass is big, the windshield feels pretty close to me, and I still know where the hood is, so I would say visibility is good. Mazda also does place an emphasis on passive safety, so crash test scores are typically great, but the IIHS has not tested this just yet. Now, when it comes to active driving aids, that's a different story. Mazda doesn't really care too much for them. I mean, you'll get autonomous braking as standard, and thankfully you have blind spot monitoring too for this price point. That's kind of, I would expect it.
And you'll have adaptive cruise, but there's no lane centering, something I believe all of its competitors have or offer. At least it's an easy car to drive at high speed.
Another thing that Mazda's been doing a great job of is making dependable vehicles. This has a completely new powertrain, so I really can't comment about anything here, as this is more complicated than basically any other Mazda. I just trust the quality that they put into most of their past products.
So if you're thinking about being a first adopter, but you also prioritize longevity, I'd feel fairly confident in recommending the CX-90.
On the road, the Mazda CX-90 shows the best qualities of Mazda. You have precise, natural feeling steering in a large SUV. You also have a quiet, tame highway ride and a refined and torquey engine, but I think that the 8-speed automatic doesn't elevate things in the right direction.
It's supposed to provide a more direct feel, but I just prefer a more polished torque converter. There's also the ride quality that's a notch below some foes, but I'd say both of those things are minor nitpicks.
They also didn't bring the ball forward when it came to practicality, and if you talk to anyone who's tried to sell CX-9s or anyone who has looked at one and turned away, the reason why they didn't buy it was most likely it's not practical enough, it feels small, and the infotainment system. Well, it does feel a little bit bigger up front.
And I have an appreciation for the infotainment system. Without a big improvement in practicality, I'm unsure that this will see any more success than the old CX-9. Yes, it is luxurious, it handles well, and I love the engine, but price and size are crucial for three-row crossovers, even if the features for the money are there. That said, I think this does make a serious case against the more expensive Acura MDX, Audi Q7, and Volvo XC90. Cars like the 3 or the CX-50 are premium for their respective classes, but they make notable cost cuts, whereas the CX-90 does not. Everything is new and it all has a clear purpose. Bring an authentic, upscale experience at a price that easily undercuts the competition. If you're looking for a full-blown luxury SUV that can accommodate a large family, the CX-90 deserves a look, whether you're on a budget or not. Overall, this is a gamble. Luxury buyers are historically loyal and value brand image. Your Honda and Kia folks are also likely to just be unimpressed by the space. Just like usual, Mazda brings character and quality to the fight. This time it even ups the ante, but as great as it is, I'm worried the 90 put its premium eggs into the wrong basket, and its failure to address prior complaints may have consequences. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, then please leave a like to help me get a hold of the mysterious algorithm. Subscribe and hit the bell for more. Follow me on Patreon for an additional podcast. I'll catch you in the next one.